Chapter 314, The Second Wave, 2. Why eyeing? Staring at the incoming attack, I slashed down. However, the moment I slashed down, I came to a sudden realization and forcefully stopped myself mid-swing. UK. This was probably not a good idea, as a groan soon escaped from my mouth and an inexplicable pain coursed through my muscles. But I didn't have time to care about that. Coating my fists with wind scions, I punched out, and a ferocious force burst out from my fist. Poochie. My punch soon collided with the demon's attack, and the demon was pushed back. KHH. Gritting my teeth, I glanced towards my right hand, where a large wound appeared. Red blood dripped down from the ground. Gritting my teeth and withstanding the pain, I glared at the demon opposite me. For a moment, I forgot about my training. If not for my sudden realization, the sword in my hand would have been long broken into pieces. There was no way the sword could have withstood the full force coming from the demon's previous attack. Lifting my sword slightly and seeing that it was still okay, I sighed in relief. Just like Malville said, I need to be more efficient when defending and attacking. Tightening my grip on the sword, I proceeded to take a deep breath. Whying? It was at that moment that the demon reappeared in front of me. A sharp force quickly headed in my direction. Icily staring at the incoming attack, I wasn't panicked. Just as the demon's sharp nails were about to reach me, rotating my heel, my body appeared by the left side of the demon. Clenching onto the hilt of the sword, I slashed down. Clang! To my surprise, the demon was able to react on time. Twisting its torso, the demon blocked my attack with its sharp and sturdy nails. Once the sword came into contact with the nails, a few sparks flew. However, rather than trying to attack again, I increased the strength of my attack. Sure enough, the difference in our strength was too big. Before the demon could realize what had happened, its body directly smashed towards the ground. Bang! Raising my leg, I mercilessly kicked the demon in the face. Yuck! As soon as my foot landed on the demon's face, the demon let out a strange noise as its body flew backward. Taking advantage of the opportunity, stomping my foot on the ground and borrowing the momentum from the impact, I shot towards the demon at incredible speed. Spurt! This time, there were no mistakes as my sword cleanly cut the demon's body in half.
Ha! Ha!
Without wasting any time, taking out a potion from my dimensional space, I quickly downed it. Soon enough, the wounds on my body started to heal at an alarming rate. Bang! Just as I finished the potion, 5 more demons broke through the first line of defense. They all soon turned their attention towards me. Fuck! Dropping the potion on the ground, I brushed some of the loose hair away from my face and silently muttered. If this continues, I might die at this rate. At the same time, utility center. Clang! Clang! Sparks flew and a large hammer fell on the red piece of metal sitting on a large anvil. Holding onto the hammer, a relatively younger dwarf pounded the metal. Harder! Behind him, with his arms crossed, was Malville, who strictly shouted. Put more power into it. How do you expect the metal to shape into what you want with that little bit of power? I'm trying. Malvin's disciple shouted back with a voice full of grievance. He was already trying his best, yet Malville repeatedly told him to hammer even harder. It's nae enough, I want ye to pound the metal, faster and harder, Ornal. The more time ye waste the harder it becomes. The best time to pound metal was right when it was piping hot. Once it cooled down, it would practically be impossible to shape. When heated, the atoms within the metal begin to vibrate, and as a result, the atoms move farther apart. Thanks to this phenomenon, it becomes easier to mold the metal. Ha! Letting out a cry, the disciple, whose name was Ornal, again hammered the metal. Bang! Bang! This continued for 10 minutes until finally, a perfectly square-shaped piece of metal rested on top of the anvil.
Ha! Ha!
Done! Ornal cried out in joy as he let go of the hammer, heavily hitting the ground. Sweat trickled down the side of his face. Not bad. Carefully picking up the box, Malval complimented. See, if ye put work into it, ye really can come up with some good stuff. Too tired to listen to Malval's compliments, the young dwarf weakly lifted his head and suddenly asked. Master, did ye really give that human a broken sword? Broken sword? Malval raised his brow. Nodding his head, the disciple elaborated. Ye, the old worn-out one you always told me never to throw away. Ever since becoming Malval's disciple, he had seen that old worn-out sword resting in the artifact box that Malval always brought with him. He always thought that it was a waste of a sword, and now that he had given it to that human, he couldn't help but be skeptical about his master's decision. Was he trying to kill the human? Isn't that a little bit too cruel? Taken aback, Malval glanced at his disciple and pointed at himself. Pa, ye think I'm that cruel? Yes. The disciple answered out of instinct. Smack. Before he could realize it, Malval had already chopped his head. Oh you. Ornal screamed out in pain. Throwing his disciple a look of disdain, Malval shouted. Like I actually give him a sword that break easily. What? But that sword be clearly failed. Malval once again raised his hand, threatening to chop his disciple in the head once again. At his master's threat, Ornal immediately became wary and took a couple of steps back. Then, with an amicable smile on his face, he tried to calm his master down. Master, I'm sorry. Ye know I like to joke around. Rolling his eyes at his disciple's behavior, Malval lowered his hand, much to his disciple's relief. He then proceeded to sit on a stool. That sword over there be as tough as any sword can be. The only reason I told him what I told him was so that he be more careful when fighting. Listening to his master's words, the disciple was suddenly enlightened. His master was a lot more soft-hearted than he had originally thought. By telling the human that the sword was brittle, when in reality it wasn't, he was trying to make him realize his flaws and correct them as he fought. I'm sorry I misunderstood. But if the SW... Before he knew it, Malval had turned around and aimed a kick in his direction. Enough talking, get back to work, we've got a lot o' things to craft. Clang! Ugh! Taking a couple of steps back, I let out a pained groan. Standing opposite of me were 3 demons. Behind them were the corpses of 2 demons I had killed with a lot of effort. They were all untitled demons, as such, they were much weaker than me, yet, I was having trouble dealing with them. God! I was beyond pissed at this point. For me to have so much trouble dealing with a bunch of demons I could have killed with a tap of my sword was really frustrating. Not only that, the injuries on my body were slowly starting to accumulate. If not for the potions, I would have long bled out. Hup! Crying inside of my heart, I slashed down. Though the demon tried to defend, just like before, the green hue around the sword acted as a barrier and redirected the demon's hands away. Violently kneeing the demon in the face, I slashed diagonally. The demon met a similar fate to that of its companions, and that was its inevitable death.
Ha! Ha!
Supporting my body with the sword, I heavily gulped for air, and a satisfied smile appeared on my face. At long last, though still rough around the edges, I finally found a way to improve. Chapter 315, The Second Wave, 3. Spurt. Retrieving my sword back from the corpse of a demon, I icily looked towards the distance. About half a day had passed since the start of the second wave, and as of now, the situation was under control. Although the first line of defense had been breached multiple times, I, alongside Hein, Ava, and Leopold, had done an excellent job at keeping the demons from breaching the second line. Of course, we weren't the only ones standing in the second line of defense, but judging from the body count alone, we were some of the few individuals that had made the most contributions. This was mainly due to the fact that the powerful individuals had not made a move yet. S56. Slashing the sword down to get rid of the blood coating it, I turned to face the others. "You guys doing all right?" Clang! Blocking an incoming attack, Hein let out a muffled groan before finally stabilizing his footing. Turning his head, he forced a smile. "KHH.
Yeah.
Though I'm a bit tired." Raising my hand, I pointed towards my wrist, or more specifically, towards my bracelet. "Drink a potion then. It'll help out." "Right, I almost forgot about that." "You what?" His answer made me shake my head. Perhaps it was because he was too excited, but it seemed as though Hein completely forgot about the fact that potions existed. "Tell the others to cover for you while you drink a potion." "Oka, hook." But just before Hein could take out a potion, a demon shot explosively towards him, and a whistling sound arose. Soon the demon violently clashed against Hein's shield. Bang! Fortunately, Hein was quick to react. Even though he had been distracted the moment the demon attacked, angling his shield right in front of his shoulder, he nudged it slightly and cushioned the attack of the demon. Sparks flew, and Hein proudly remained standing on the same spot as before. Unmoving. Silently staring at Hein from behind, I was impressed by his performance. Not only him but Ava and Leopold's performances deeply impressed me. In fact, they were doing so well that altogether, they had accumulated quite a substantial amount of kills. Quite a few more than me, who was a whole rank higher than them. Well, this was to be expected. After all, I wasn't fighting at my fullest abilities. My body count would have been way higher if I had been using the keiki style. On another note, I was also improving as the fight continued. The more I got used to this new fighting style, the faster I started killing the demons. If before it took me a minute to get rid of a D-ranked demon, it only took half of the time now. Slowly but surely, everyone was improving. Sensing something, I looked towards my right. Sure enough, a demon was quickly headed in my direction. Before long, it appeared a couple of meters away from me. Heek! Sinisterly opening its mouth, the demon let out a screech and viciously slashed in my direction. Why-eyeing. Staring at the incoming attack, I was completely unfazed. Raising my sword and thrusting it forward, the green hue enveloping my sword expanded and contracted rapidly. Shoop! What came as a result of this was a subtle suction force that altered the direction of the demon's attack. An instant later, gently tapping on the ground with my foot, the ground cracked apart with a bang, and I appeared only a few centimeters away from the demon. The speed at which I moved was so fast that the demon could not react in time. Raising my sword, I slashed upwards, cleanly cutting the demon's head off. Spurt! As black blood sprayed everywhere, the head of the demon quietly rolled in front of me. Wiping my face, I softly muttered, "That's another one down." But just as my words faded, Vwam! It was then that a grim pressure suddenly enveloped the battlefield. Glancing towards the distance, a black humanoid figure stood in the air with its wings wide open. The moment the humanoid figure appeared, I instantly knew that things were about to become serious. Behind the humanoid figure, the moon shone brightly, enveloping the humanoid figure and enhancing its features. The whole battlefield soon came at a standstill and everyone turned their attention towards the sky. Splurt! Stepping on the head of the demon I killed before, unprecedented seriousness clouded my face. Looks like the commander of the second wave finally showed up. Moments before the humanoid figure showed up. What do you think? Two men were looking at the battle ensuing outside of the walls from a small room. One of them had his hands interlocked behind his back. He was the headmaster of the lock, Douglas. The other person stood behind the old man with his arms crossed. He was none other than Waylon Rochefield, Emma's father. Similarly, staring at the battle from the small room, Waylon leaned his body forward a bit. Raising his hand, he pinched slightly. The video that was playing before them zoomed, and a couple of figures appeared on the screen. More precisely, they were the images of two youths and an adult who supported them from behind. The adult would take out a weird gun-like object and shoot it at the demons from time to time. Most impressive was his commanding abilities, as he perfectly told the two youths what to do. The way the three of them coordinated with each other deeply impressed Waylon, as he couldn't help but compliment them. "They're good." Leaning back on his seat, he crossed his arms and looked at Douglas, who was wordlessly staring at the same screen. The pensive look on his face reminded Waylon of a sage. Calm and wise. Pointing at the screen, Waylon started making small talk. The guy who is leading them from the back seems very experienced. Judging from how he can make the right calls in this situation, he must have gone through similar situations before. Having observed them long enough, Waylon could tell that the man helping the two youths was highly experienced. Not only were his calls the ideal ones, but the timing at which he supported them was also superb. Moving his hand slightly, the video soon focused on the two youths. On the other hand, these two youths seemed to be extremely talented, especially the girl. Waylon's brows furrowed tightly. If I'm not wrong, she's controlling 4 beasts. That's almost unheard of. Typically a beast tamer could only control 1 beast at a time. This was the common consensus. On rare occasions, some could tame 2, but even then, they were extremely expensive to take care of, and most of the time, they weren't a class that people paid particular attention to. However, things were different if the beast tamer could control more than 1 animal. If they could control more than 2 beasts, things would be very different. Is it perhaps the flute? It was then that he noticed the girl holding onto a flute. Whenever she blew her mouth onto it, the beasts would move. It was almost as though they were hypnotized. An intrigued look suddenly appeared on his face as he focused his whole attention on Ava. How interesting. To think that there was something like that. It was just a hunch for now, but the more he observed, the more he found his conjecture to be true. But he wasn't quite sure just yet. The flute could very well be an artifact that enhanced her mental capabilities. Turning his head and looking at Douglas, Waylon suddenly asked, "What do you think, Douglas?" Silently staring at the screen, Waylon did not answer back immediately. At the moment his attention was fully focused on a particular youth on the screen. He was neither the girl nor boy that Waylon was looking at but someone else. He was another youth with jet black hair and deep blue eyes. Standing a little bit further away from them, he skillfully dealt with the demons that were coming his way. Turning around and looking toward where Douglas was looking, Waylon had a sudden look of understanding. "I see, so you're interested in him." Stroking his beard, Douglas curiously asked, "You know him?" "I've met him before." Waylon replied with a slight smile. "Oh." Douglas's brow raised, and his interest was instantly piqued. Turning to face Waylon, he asked, "Can you tell me more?" Glancing at Douglas, Waylon leaned back and nodded his head. "It was at the when I was walking down the streets. He was a human, so pretty easy to spot." Waylon coughed in the middle and corrected himself, but judging from how indifferent Douglas was, Waylon knew that he had not fooled him. It had to be noted that he wasn't actually allowed to go anywhere near that tavern since he wasn't allowed to get drunk. After all, they couldn't allow themselves to let down their guards in such an unfamiliar place. Knowing that he had slipped up, Waylon quickly changed the topic. Anyhow, what makes you so interested in him? Shaking his head, Douglas's brows knit for a second. Touching his beard, he thoughtfully answered. He seems familiar. Familiar? This time it was Waylon's turn to be surprised. You've also met him before? Or have you not realized that this is the youth from the video you showed me before? Glancing at the video, Waylon tilted his head. Now that I take a good look at it, compared to what we've last seen, he seems to be fighting a lot more differently. Does it look like his swordsmanship has regressed? Or is it just me? The way he was fighting was beyond sloppy. His attacks were all over the place, and he seemed to be having trouble fighting opponents weaker than him. From the looks of it, he lacked a lot of experience. Compared to the last time he fought the demons, his performance was more lackluster. No, it has. Compared to before, his swordsmanship has regressed a bit. Wait, that aside. What did you mean by he seemed familiar? Stroking his beard, Douglas hesitantly spoke. I think he's supposed to be one of the students Donna had told me about, it's just that. Just that. He's supposed to have died. As soon as Douglas's words faded, silence enveloped the room. Then, not long after, Waylon's face turned strange. What? Did I hear wrongly? Dead? He's standing right there. How can he be dead? Shaking his head, Douglas kept looking at the youth on the screen. Remember the incident back at the lock? When the monolith attacked? Yes, I remember very clearly. A bitter smile appeared on Waylon's face. How could he not remember? Douglas overexerted himself by using the special skill that allowed him to create a clone of himself during that day. He was bedridden for a month because of the incident. During those days, he had to go to replace him and go to boring meetings every day. Those days were a nightmare to him. Squinting his eyes, Douglas pointed at the youth. That day, that student should have died. At Douglas's revelation, Waylon's face became serious. How certain are you? At first, I was quite certain, but... Intently staring at how the youth was fighting, Douglas started having doubts. I've not seen him use his main sword style yet. What do you trying? Cutting Waylon off was a sudden message that appeared on the screen. Before long, a red message covered half of the screen. Marquee ranked demon spotted in the northern area, please provide assistance. Talk about bad timing. Waylon sighed before standing up. Though he seemed light-hearted at the moment, his current disposition was nothing but serious as a powerful pressure started exuding from his body. Taking off his coat and putting on 2 black gloves, he looked at Douglas. I'll be going now, tell me later if you find anything more about that kid. Glancing at Waylon by the side of his eyes, Douglas gave him a simple nod. Be careful. I will. Right as he spoke those words, Waylon exited the room. Once he left, silence once again enveloped the room. Bringing his hands together, Douglas's eyes never left the youth on the screen. He continued to stare at the youth for a while before muttering. Are you really the inheritor of the Keiki style? Chapter 316, The Second Wave, 4. Leviathan Building, Private Training Ground, Lock. Clang! Clang! A sword and 2 daggers interlocked together, and sparks flew in the air. Shortly after, 2 figures appeared a couple of meters away from each other. Their breathing was even, indicating that their exchange was only a light one. They were Kevin and Jean. Staring at the daggers in his hands, Jean frowned. Pointing his dagger at Kevin, he darkly said, "What are you doing?" His tone carried hints of anger. "What do you mean?" Kevin absent-mindedly lowered his sword. Glaring at Kevin, Jean put his daggers away. "If you're not interested in sparring with me properly, then don't call me again. Don't waste my time like this." Just before Kevin could reply, Jean turned around and left the training grounds. Staring at Jin's back, Kevin let out a sigh.
Ha!
Although he wanted to refute what Jean had said, he couldn't muster any words to argue back. That was because he was right. He was not in his right mind yet. Ever since the appearance of the Red Book, he could no longer focus on basic things such as training or studying. He didn't know why, but the image of the Red Book never left his mind. It was as though a curse had been implanted in his mind, making him think of it all the time. "Just what are you?" Walking towards the side of the training ground, Kevin's eyes paused on a certain book beside a bench. Walking up to it, he slowly picked it up. A day ago, after mustering his courage one more time, much to his relief, he realized that he could now touch the book without going through some crazy experience like before. From the looks of things, it seemed as though it was a one-time thing. Sitting on the bench beside the book, Kevin opened the book and read what was written on it. ====. The oppressive pressure bore down on every corner of the battlefield, and a thick wave of bloodlust began to spread in the air. Staring at the humanoid figure in the distance, face became dyed with unprecedented seriousness. "Looks like it's about time I get serious." The climax of the second wave was just about to begin. ===. Second wave? Climax? What is going on, and just who are you? The more Kevin read the book, the more questions he had. The book was a complete mystery to him. The more he had it with him, the bigger the mystery became. For example, who was the figure depicted in the book? Kevin did try to look back at previous pages to see if he could read anything, but they were locked. Regardless of how much Kevin tried to read the previous pages, the pages wouldn't budge. Because of his apprehension about the book, Kevin did not experiment much with it. But from what he found out in the last day or so of having it was only visible to him. No one else could see it, further adding to the book's mystery. Tracing his finger on the words written on the book, his finger paused on the blurred-out name on the page. Many times he tried to figure out who the person was, but in the end, he couldn't. The only thing he knew about the person was that he was a male, and was currently participating in a war. Turning the page of the book, Kevin was met with a blank page. Tightening the grip of the book, he silently cursed. Damn it, if only I could read back. As long as he could read back on the book, he'd be able to figure out the identity of the mysterious figure being depicted in the book. Unfortunately, he couldn't. As though fate itself was laughing at him, the only thing he could see at the moment was what was happening to the person on the other side of the book. This is annoying. Putting the book down, Kevin let out a tired sigh. He believed that as long as he found out who the person in the book was, he'd be able to get a better understanding of what was happening to him. Trying. It was then that his watch suddenly vibrated. Staring at the caller ID, Kevin realized that it was Emma. Putting the book down, Kevin answered the call. Emma? Instead of returning to his dorm, Jean directly headed for the lock's entrance. Waiting for him outside of the academy campus was a black limousine. Young master. A beautiful woman dressed in a black suit was greeting him outside of the limousine. Bowing her head, she walked towards the passenger side of the limousine and opened the door for him. Briefly glancing at the girl, Jean got in the limousine and thanked her. Thank you. It is my duty. Once again, lowering her head, the girl closed the door and walked towards the other side of the limousine, where she entered and sat a few rows away from Jean. Her name was Eleanor Plight, and she was Jin's bodyguard. She was an A-ranked hero that had worked for the Starlight Guild for 7 years. Aside from raiding dungeons, her job was always to make sure that Jean did not leave the academy by himself. Leaning forward towards the driver at the front of the car, Eleanor ordered, "Please bring us back to the guild." Understood. At Eleanor's orders, the driver pressed on the gas pedal, and the car soon sped towards the busy streets of Ashton City, towards the Starlight Guild, the second-ranked guild in the human domain. Once the car finally picked up speed, Eleanor leaned back on her seat and looked at Jean, who was casually staring at the scenery outside the window. "Young master, I'm sorry for abruptly calling you like this, but this was at the request of your grandfather." Giving Eleanor a sideway look, Jean turned his attention to the scenery outside the window and softly responded, "I understand." Unbothered by Jin's distant attitude, Eleanor continued, "Young master, I would like to remind you that today's meeting is a secret and that you must not tell anyone else about what is going to happen." Closing his eyes, Jean silently nodded. "I understand." From the very moment his grandfather had called him, Jean knew that whatever was going to happen in the meeting, it would be imperative. After all, his grandfather rarely showed himself nowadays. He would only show himself when there was an important announcement that would decide the family's fate or when it was his birthday. Taking a glass of champagne beside him, Jean twirled the cup before taking a drink. He had a feeling that today's meeting would change his fate completely. Move back for now. The moment the demon appeared in the air, I knew that the situation was about to take a drastic turn. The balance that we have kept ever since the beginning of the second wave was soon going to be broken. For now, the best option would be to retreat further back. "Guys, move back to the third line of defense." The residual magic released from the demon in the air was extremely dangerous. Perhaps I could withstand it, but the others were still a bit too weak to handle the residual magic that came from what seemed to be a Viscount-ranked demon. They might suffer serious internal injuries. Okay. Thankfully the others listened to me and did as I ordered. Turning my head, I repeated, "Make sure you guys don't move towards the second line. It's too dangerous for you at the moment." There were 3 defensive lines, and at the moment, we were stationed at the second. There wasn't a particular reason why we were stationed on the second line. It was completely random. Not that it mattered since the truly strong demons were being handled by the people at the top of the tower and the first defensive line where the strongest orcs stood. The second defensive line was mainly to clean up the demons that weren't worth taking note of or somehow slipped through. The third defensive line was there for extra reassurance. So far, they had still not done anything as we had cleaned most of the demons that had managed to slip through. It had to be noted that, although the third defensive line was the one that faced the least number of demons, it was the most crucial line. That was because right behind them were the dwarves and elves who were shooting spells at the demons from above. Unlike the orcs, they were powerless in close range. Boom! Just as I expected, when I told the others to retreat, a terrifying shockwave swept the whole battlefield. The ground trembled, and a strong gale of wind swept past everyone. Some of the weaker individuals were directly sent flying. Bang! Bang! What followed after was another wave of demons crashing towards the first line of defense. This time they were a lot bolder and bloodthirsty than before. Before long, more and more demons broke through the first line of defense and quickly headed for our direction. There were even a couple of titled demons among the demons that had managed to break through. The situation was dire, and I knew that I could no longer hold my strength back. Without hesitation, I drew 4 rings in the air and redirected them towards the others, aiding them in their retreat. Vroom! Vroom! Hurry up to the third line. I shouted at them. Unlike them, I chose to remain in the second line of defense. As I drew more circles in the air, the mana inside my body started to deplete rapidly. Fortunately, I had enough mana recovery potions with me. I didn't use Ring of Vindication before to focus on my swordsmanship wholeheartedly. But that was before, now was different. Putting the blunt sword into my dimensional space, I proceeded to take a newer sword. Like hell would I gamble my own life during a war. Although I tried my best to listen to what Malval was saying, I knew that something like this was bound to happen at the end of the day. There was a time for everything, and now was not the time for me to care about my training. Why yawing? It was then that I suddenly felt a subtle stinging sensation on my face. Turning my head, I saw a demon fiercely approaching my way. I knew that this was no regular demon from the pressure released by the demon's body. I could tell it was a titled one. To my luck, it was only a Baron ranked one, something that my abilities could handle. Raising its hands, a vicious attack rapidly approached my direction. Unprecedented seriousness clouded my face as my toes pressed onto the ground. The ground beneath cracked with a bang, and I narrowly avoided the attack by a hairbreadth, much to the demon's surprise. The demon that had attacked me was quick to recover once it noticed its attack missing. Expanding its wings, the demon's blood-red eyes locked onto me. Then, flapping its enormous wings, the demon disappeared from where it was standing, leaving behind an afterimage. Coldly looking at the demon, 4 rings suddenly appeared from behind me. Redirecting them towards my right with my finger, I raised my hand. Freeze! The moment the demon reappeared in front of me, clenching my fists, a sudden gravitational pull discharged from the rings. The demon froze in midair. Without wasting any time, I placed my hand on the sword's sheath. The second movement of the Keiki-style, horizon-splitting slash. Click! In a flash, a head soon rolled on the ground. Staring at the head, I knew that it was not over. Spurt! Looking at the body of the demon in front of me, my hand pierced through its chest. Once my hand reached deep enough, feeling something, I retrieved my hand back, and a black orb soon appeared in my hand. It was a demon core. Putting it in my dimensional space, the demon's body slowly started to crumble right before my eyes. I missed this feeling. Chapter 317, Meeting 1. Click! The usual clicking sound rang out, and 3 heads rolled on the ground. Of the 3 demons I had just killed, none were titled demons, and as such, they died by a simple tap of my sword. Rumble! It was then that the ground suddenly shook. Turning my head and staring towards the distance, where the sound came from, I soon spotted 2 figures standing in the sky face to face with each other. One figure resembled a human, while the other was the same demon from before. The Marquis ranked one. Is that Waylon? Upon closer look, I realized that the human figure was none other than Waylon Rochefield, Emma's father. So they've decided to send him out? From what I've heard, each side of the city had multiple S-ranked individuals assigned. Being on the safer side, the northern area had fewer assigned S ranks, and from the looks of it, Waylon was part of the group in charge of keeping the northern area safe. There were definitely more waiting on standby, but it seems like they've thought that Waylon was enough. Boom! A strong gale suddenly brushed past me. This came as a result of Waylon and the demon releasing their aura in the sky. Ugh! Leaning forward slightly and covering my face with my arm, I tried my best to remain balanced. My clothes fluttered wildly, and a paper-like sound echoed next to my ears. The already oppressive air became even more oppressive, and the colors black and gold suddenly enveloped the sky. Soon, the 2 majestic auras clashed together. Ashton City, Starlight Guild. Clank! This way, young master. The limousine soon stopped in front of an enormous modern building. The building had a streamlined design with glass coating the outer surface of the building. The minimalistic and simplistic design of the building was indeed a sight to those that saw it from below. In fact, it was so well designed that it had become a tourist attraction to those that came from outside of Ashton City. Casually glancing at the building, Jean followed Eleanor inside. Standing at the building entrance were a lot of people that ranged from heroes, mercenaries, agents, and tourists. All were eagerly trying their best to enter the place. Jean didn't have much trouble entering the building as Eleanor's aura made those that obstructed their path move away in fear. The interior of the building was finely decorated with neat and simplistic furniture that perfectly complemented the calm ambience of the place. Having been in this place ever since young, Jean casually glanced at his surroundings before heading deeper into the building. As he walked, all of the staff bowed their heads in reverence. Had it been the old Jean, he would have savored the looks coming from the staff, but now he was different. He no longer cared for such looks. Ding! Stopping in front of the elevator, the door soon opened, and Eleanor stopped to the side to let Jean in. "Young master, please." Lowering his head in acknowledgement, Jean entered the elevator. Eleanor followed after and pressed on the bottom that led to the highest floor. As soon as she pressed on the bottom, the elevator reached the top floor within a couple of seconds. It was so fast that by the time the doors closed, they immediately opened after. Ding! Exiting the elevator and casually looking around the top floor, Jean turned right and walked towards a certain office. He knew very well how old this man was, 105 years old. Grandfather. Greeting him, Jean sat on the sofa opposite the main desk. With his back still facing Jean, Evangelion asked. "Do you know why I called you here?" "I do not." Jean shook his head. His grandfather was always someone that did things on a whim, so he had no idea about his purpose in asking him here. "Is that so?" Turning around, Evangelion looked at Jean. With a small smile, he walked towards his desk and sat down. Leaning back on his oversized leather chair, Evangelion took a good look at Jean. The more he looked, the greater the satisfaction in his face grew. Almost C rank at the age of 18, very impressive. You're even more talented than your father back when he was your age. Jin's rate of progression was outstanding. Although Jean had a lot of resources poured into him, that didn't mean that he would be guaranteed success immediately. His current achievements were a testament to his hard work. His current achievements were fundamentally all due to his own efforts. Crossing his arms, Evangelion went straight to the point. "Since you've come of age and you've shown me your immense talent, I've decided that it is finally time for me to hand over to you the family 5-star martial manual." Cry of the Fallen was the name of the 5-star martial manual, and it was a dagger art that was solely handed down to the Horton first-in-line inheritors. Although it is a tough technique to learn, once you learn it, nothing will stop you from reaching the top and carrying the Starlight Guild to greater heights. Listening to his grandfather, Jin's face remained stoic. As though the 5-star manual was nothing in his eyes. This obviously did not go unnoticed by Evangelion, who curiously asked. "What's wrong? You don't like my arrangements?" "I'm satisfied," Jean replied. Although he didn't show it outwardly, he was actually quite satisfied with the arrangement. But that was it. Satisfied. He knew just how much effort was required to make the manual into something truly formidable. It would take hours upon hours of blood, sweat, and tears before he could finally utilize the manual properly. Only upon finally reaching that point would he truly be happy. "Since you're satisfied, I will give you the art now." Evangelion was a man who did not like to waste time. Listening to what Jean said, he decided to quickly give him the sword art. Motioning Jean to come closer to him, Evangelion pressed his index finger on his forehead. Instantly, a white hue enveloped Jin's body completely. Following this, floods of the information entered his mind. For the next couple of minutes, Jin stood still like a statue with his eyes closed tightly. After a while, opening his eyes, the aura around Jin changed. If before, it was cold and carried hints of arrogance, it was now calm. His usual cold demeanor melted slightly, and what replaced it was a calm one that seemed as though it would remain calm despite being in the direst of situations. Lowering his head, Jin softly muttered. Status. Status ===========================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================Strength, C. Agility, B. Stamina, C. Intelligence, C. Mana capacity, C. Luck, D. Charm, B+. Profession. Assassin LVL.5. Martial Manual. Shadow Harvester, Essence Realm of Mastery. Dagger art primarily focused on lightning-fast attacks that slice through the air at astonishing speeds. The greater the mastery, the faster each swing becomes, making each attack harder to defend against. Void Link, Greater Realm of Mastery. Movement art that enables user to momentarily move between shadows. The greater the mastery, the longer the user can travel between shadows. Speed of user inside of shadow is tripled, and when exiting the shadow, user speed will be considerably boosted for a couple of seconds. Cry of the Fallen. An 18-stroke dagger art that becomes progressively faster and stronger with each strike. Upon completion of the 18th stroke, the attack magnifies by a factor of 18. Skills. E. A mana conglomeration. A skill that enables user to gather all of their mana into a singular point and letting it explode in one swift attack that multiplies the attack power by a factor of 10. F. A light eye. A skill that stimulates the neurons located in the eyes, enabling the user to enhance their vision. From being able to see further away, to being able to see at night and being able to slow down the world around him. Light eye enables user to enhance ocular functions. Jin was satisfied with what he saw. Although he didn't have many skills and arts in his arsenal, each and every single one of their mastery was above the greater realm of mastery, with his previous main dagger art even reaching the essence realm of mastery. Although it was a bit of a pity for him to suddenly switch his dagger art, at the end of the day what really mattered was the level of his profession. Now that it had leveled up all the way to level 5, reaching greater heights with his new art wasn't going to be a problem. Plus, he could still use his old dagger art whenever he wanted to. How are you feeling? Disrupting Jin out of his moment, Evangelion opened his mouth and asked with a slight smile on his face. You like the new art? Turning his attention back towards his grandfather, Jin faintly nodded his head. Yes, I like it a lot. That's great. Evangelion muttered with great satisfaction. Closing the status window, Jin asked. Is there anything else you wish to ask of me, grandfather? Eyeing Jin from the side of his eyes, Evangelion's face became serious. Looks like you've realized that this wasn't the only reason I called you here. So for now, sit. Evangelion pointed at the seat behind Jin. Doing as his grandfather instructed, Jin sat down. Propping his elbows on his desk, Evangelion interlocked his hands together. The 3rd and 4th rank guilds have recently contacted me with an offer. His words instantly caused Jin, who was seated down, to frown. What is the offer? They want to create an alliance with us to take down the Demon Hunter Guild. The Demon Hunter Guild? Jin tilted his head to the side. Even if we combine forces, we won't be able to take them down. Evangelion shook his head. You might not know this, but reports have said that the guild master of the Demon Hunter Guild has gone missing. Missing? The frown on Jin's face deepened. It was then that a sudden look of understanding appeared on his face as he leaned backward. Is this why Amanda left the academy? If so, this made a lot of sense. Based on what he knew about her, she was the type of person that would shoulder all responsibilities by herself. Her choice of leaving the lock did not make sense to Jin before, but now he finally understood why she did what she did. Jin asked, lifting his head and looking at his grandfather straight in the eyes. Why have you told me this? Evangelion pushed a stack of papers to the side of the desk. I wanted to know your opinion. Should I accept the offer or not? No. Jin responded without a hint of hesitation. His quick response was unexpected as Evangelion quickly became curious. Elaborate. Tell me why we shouldn't take the offer. Standing up, Jin's calm face slowly turned into one of disgust. Since when have we the Horton family ever allied ourselves with others to gang up on someone? If we want to get rid of the Demon Hunter Guild, then we do it ourselves, not with the combined powers of the others. Not only would that make us look weak to the others, but it would also destroy the reputation that we've built. Pausing, Jin carefully looked towards the window that overlooked the city from above. On another note, if we help them, all we'd be doing is putting a target on ourselves. Once the Demon Hunter Guild was gone, Starlight Guild would become the next first-ranked guild, and from there the cycle would repeat. Even if they came up with a deal, at the end of the day, there were no allies in front of Prophet. Before they could realize what had happened, they'd suddenly find a knife stabbed in their back. And it was because of these factors that he believed refusing the offer would be the most ideal option. If they really want to take down the Demon Hunter Guild, let them. We can just stand by the side and reap the profits after. Though I doubt they would really do that. Looking back at his grandfather, Jin seriously said. If you really want to surpass the Demon Hunter Guild, do it through our own merits rather than by stealing them. Wordlessly staring at his nephew from behind his desk, a large smile soon appeared on Evangelin's face. Looks like we're on the same page. Chapter 318, Meeting 2. Boom! Ferocious shockwaves appeared in the sky. The residual mana that spread from the shockwaves enveloped the entire battlefield. Bang! This exchange had been going on for about a day now, and it had started to become progressively stronger. Both sides were still not going all out as they were gauging each other and buying time for those fighting below. Whenever the situation shifted for one side, the other would quickly interfere to return the balance. Why don't you guys open up the barrier? The situation looks tough for you guys. The Marquis-ranked demon pointed at the battle that was ensuing below as he coldly laughed. Will you guys be able to last without it? You're really full of nonsense. Waylon glared at the Marquis-ranked demon. His hand that held onto the large broadsword swung downward. The large broadsword whirled around, releasing waves of pressuring wind sounds. Why eyeing? Seeing Waylon's swift and ferocious attack, the Marquis-ranked demon's face grew darker. Finally, he let out a cold laugh, and a ferocious aura suddenly sprang out from its body. You're truly one annoying human. At the same time. KHH. Taking a couple of steps back, a light groan escaped from my mouth. Standing opposite of me was a demon. Similar to the other demons that I had killed before, it was Baron ranked 1. However, this time, the situation was different.
Huh?
Click! Crying inside of my heart, I tapped on the sheath of my sword. Just like usual, a subtle clicking sound rang out. Clang! However, unlike my previous fights, the demon did not cower at my attack as it met it head-on. The demon appeared to specialize in speed, therefore, it left me with little to no time to attack. The moment I was about to attack, the demon was already upon me, preventing me from releasing the full might of my attack. Taking a step forward, the demon's sharp claws carried a powerful force as they violently met my sword mid-swing. Clang! A clear sound of metal on metal came rippling out from the midpoint where my sword and the claw met. Then, following the circular sound waves that came as a result of the collision between my sword and the demon's claws, a powerful force soon began to spread out, blowing everything that was near away. The ground beneath me and the demon also began to crack, forming small crevices that expanded for a couple of meters. KHH. At this fierce exchange, I came out at a disadvantage as I took a couple of steps back in contrast to the demon who was merely pushed one step back. Kakik, very good human. I didn't expect to meet a human this strong at your age. A disdained laugh escaped from the demon. It appeared that the demon was feeling confident about its chances against me. Or perhaps it was just trying to provoke me. Bang! Ignoring the demon's blatant provocation, I stomped my foot on the ground, and my body explosively shot towards the demon, like a sharp arrow. However, the demon seemed to have expected my attack, as it did not do any of those useless dodging actions. Instead, its sharp and sturdy nails swiftly danced around as none of my attacks were able to penetrate past them. Every time my attacks would meet the demon's claws, they would be violently repelled back, creating an opportunity for the demon, which it rightfully didn't miss. Clang! Clang! The clear sound of metal being exchanged sounded throughout the battlefield, as the ringing metallic sound lingered in the air for a while after each exchange. Bang! Sent flying backward, I crashed against the side of the tower. Fine miniature crevices began to spread around the area. I crashed as I spat saliva from my mouth. Kook! Wiping the side of my lips, I looked down and found blood lingering by the thumb area of my hand. Standing up, my eyes locked onto the demon opposite to me. Although the demon was also sent back during our previous exchange, for anyone that witnessed our exchange, they would have been able to tell that the demon held the upper hand. Removing the hairband on my hair and letting my hair loose, I started to circulate the mana inside of my body fully. Enough playing. Once again, wiping the side of my mouth, a subtle green glow enveloped the bottom of my shoes. Right after, my vision blurred, and I reappeared a couple of meters away from the demon, much to its surprise. The previous exchanges were merely me trying to figure out the demon's attack pattern and what worked against it. Although I did suffer quite a bit during our previous exchanges, I now understood how it fought. As I reappeared in front of the demon, 3 rings revolved around my body. It was now time to end things. Bang! Just as I was about to enter the demon's attacking range, I stomped my foot on the ground and tried to stop my body from fully entering it. But this wasn't enough as the momentum I had pressured me forward, but I had a solution. Pointing with my finger forward, one disc appeared towards my left and another towards my right, a bit further from the second disc. Jumping in the air, my foot softly touched the left ring before I tensed my leg and shot towards the right ring, where a similar situation occurred. Before the demon could react, I was already upon it. The demon's face finally changed, but it was too late. A powerful wave of mana suddenly burst out from my body. Hew up! Letting out a low cry, rather than using the keiki style, I simply unsheathed my sword and swung upwards. This was no regular swing, however. The moment the demon was about to block the attack, using my last remaining ring, I used its gravitational pull effect and changed the course of the swing. Since I was already going fast, the demon was unable to react on time. Poochie! Blood poured down from above, creating a misty rain of black. Turning my head, I looked at the demon's immobile and upright body. Leaning forward slightly, the demon's body fell heavily towards the ground with a small thud. Thud! Staring at the demon's lifeless body on the ground, I was not fooled. Since the core was not destroyed, the demon was still alive. As the demon helplessly stared at the nearing ground, sheathing back my sword in my scabbard, I walked up to its body and once again pierced my arm through its body and removed the demon core before putting it inside of my dimensional space. Finally, the demon's body turned into soft powder before it was blown away by the winds that arose due to nearby conflicts. Gently rubbing my chest, which had somewhat swollen, I let out a soft cough. Cough, I can't fight anymore. Turning my head, much to my relief, I found that the fight in the distance was slowly showing signs of calming down. It looked as though the second wave was coming to an end. Wiping the right side of my mouth, I decided to move upstairs to the tower. I was no longer in the condition to fight and needed to go back upstairs to recuperate. Distancing its body from Waylon, who stood opposite, disappointment flashed the marquee-rank demon as it looked below. Looks like this attack is also a bust? Extending its hand, black threads of mana started to swirl around the demon's hands. Following this, a ferocious black ball levitated on top of its palm. The energy contained within the ball caused Waylon, who was standing opposite, to become wary. Cracka! Cracka! Black bolts of lightning crackled around the energy ball as circular waves of pressurized wind began to spread out throughout the surroundings, creating strong winds. Within seconds, the ball, which had become the size of a car, slowly started to compress together before turning the size of a football. Since we're losing, I might as well even the playing field once more. Why eyeing? But just as the demon was about to attack below, Waylon suddenly appeared before it. He had not been staying still when the demon was accumulating its energy. It wasn't like he was just going to let the demon do as it pleased. Tightly holding onto the broadsword, the golden glow around it brightened considerably. Right after, the sword lengthened drastically. Waff! Screaming at the top of his lungs, Waylon cut diagonally. From the bottom right towards the top left. You annoying fucker! The marquee-ranked demon was obviously not happy with this new development as it glared at Waylon. Then, extending its enormous wings, a small shadow cast below. Flop! Flapping the wings once, within an instant, the demon appeared 100 meters away from Waylon. Outside of the striking zone of the broadsword. But it was then that something shocking happened. Seeing that his attack was about to miss, steam slowly expanded out of Waylon's body. The veins on his face became more prominent, and his muscles expanded. A bright light shot out from his body before it directly converged with the broadsword in his hand. The broadsword once again lengthened, this time, a lot more than before. The weight of the sword also increased drastically, and the velocity of the swing followed suit. This time the demon was unable to react in time. Staring at the incoming attack, the demon had no choice but to discard its previous plans and slapped the palm that contained the ball of energy towards the incoming attack. Soon, the two forces met head-on. A powerful blast of energy shrouded the sky. An instant later, it brewed into a terrifying force that caused both the demon's and Waylon's expression to change drastically as they both hastily distanced themselves away from each other. Bang! Soon, the energy blast expanded, before reaching the battlefield below. Instantly, many of those fighting below turned into ash and a thunderous noise reverberated through the whole battlefield, drowning out every other sound. As this was a bit further away from the tower, it didn't affect those that were protecting it. But it did affect those that chose to leave the defensive line to fight the demons. Dust and debris flew everywhere, enveloping the whole battlefield and preventing anyone from seeing the conditions of the battlefield. Standing opposite to each other were the demon and Waylon. Before long, the dust cleared out, and the aftermath of their collision became clear to see for the two of them. Lowering its head and staring at the damage below, the demon's face darkened. Opening its mouth, the demon's raspy and cruel voice rang through the ears of each demon present. Retreat! Then, expanding its wings, the demon flew away. But right as it was about to leave, the demon did not forget to send one last terrifying glare in Waylon's direction. This is merely the start. Upon walking the stairs of the tower, I once again met the others. The second wave lasted a total of 2 days, and everyone was understandably tired. Me especially. Are you guys all right? Just barely. Hein replied weakly. You don't look so good. Compared to when I last saw him, he was indeed in a worse state. Not only were his clothes and hair a mess, but his shield, which he had just bought not too long ago, was almost completely broken. Ava and Leopold were also in a similar state as they were too tired to speak. Slumping down on the ground, I leaned my back on the wall. I need to rest as well. Although my body was all healed up due to the potions I had, mentally, I was anything but fine. My mind was utterly exhausted. At the end of the day, I did fight for 2 days straight without rest. Human. But just as I closed my eyelids, as if the world refused to let me rest, someone called out for me. Opening my eyes, what greeted me was a short dwarf. What is it? Someone is asking for ye, follow me. Without giving me a chance to object, the dwarf turned around and left. Hey, wait. Groaning to myself, I propped my body up and caught up with the dwarf. Given our size difference, catching up to him posed no problem for me. I still complained, though. At least wait for me, damn it. I just came back from a fierce fight. Once I reached the dwarf, I stopped complaining and just silently followed him from behind. Knowing that the dwarf wouldn't answer any of my questions, I didn't bother asking them. Not that it mattered since I already had an idea of what was happening. Looking back at the northern tower, I wondered. He should have already figured things out, no?